So we've been hearing a lot about how Israel denies humanitarian aid from coming in, how little humanitarian aid is coming in, about how, there's a humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza. There's a starvation, or rather, Gaza is on the brink of starvation and has been for about 15 months at this point since October 7th, pretty much. And so today we're going to talk about something that's pretty interesting, and it's specifically that it looks like UN, or specifically the OCHA, the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, have been misreporting, or at least as close that you could get to lying without technically directly lying as you could possibly get. So we'll be talking about that today. Joining me today is James Valiant. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And so just sort of to set the scene about what basically happened is that when you look at the again the OCHA numbers, now specifically we're just going to be looking at December 2024 as like a comparison, but you could easily replicate this even going back. Basically, they've reported that there's been 2,205 humanitarian aid trucks going into Gaza in the month of December, while the other numbers we have from COGAT, which is the sort of Israeli counterpart, it's under the Ministry of Defense. It's a coordination of government activities in the territories. They are reporting around 5,000 trucks, 4,600 around that time. So about double the amount that UN is reporting now. Why the disparity? Why is there such a difference? Well, if you look at the, again, OCHA numbers, they have a little asterisk there, well, where they say they don't report private sector numbers. Basically, they don't report any aid coming in from private sector. But that still doesn't make much sense, because if you look at the numbers from Israel, the private sector only accounts for, I think, less than 5% of the whole thing. So when you look further, it looks like the UN is pretty much only reporting numbers from two organizations, and that's it. And there's like dozens of different organizations, and if you count that all up, it comes out to about 40 to 50% that UN is simply not reporting, is simply not even acknowledging that they are not reporting on. They do mention that they don't have the private sector numbers, the justification being that they cannot directly observe arrival of aid at the Kerem Shalom crossing, specifically since May 7th, which was a nicely specific date. So I looked up what happened on May 7th. On May 7th, a Hamas rocket hit Kerem Shalom crossing. So Israel had to close it for a bit, and they reopened it later. And now humanitarian aid is still going through that. But UN is still not reporting on any of it. And just a heads up, since we are talking a lot of numbers, everything is going to be in the description. This specifically was started because I noticed a tweet from Avi Bitterman, so you can check his out. He is the one who basically he compiled the numbers, but the official report came from the Coordination of Government Activities in the Territories. That's the agency under the Defense Ministry of Israel. So we can double check all those numbers and make sure we are not going wrong anywhere here. But James, welcome to the Daily Objective. What do you think about this? Why is OCHA seemingly underreporting about half the numbers, while not even stating that they are sort of hiding behind, we don't count the private sector, yet still they don't count about half of the other stuff too. What's happening?
Well, it's not as close to a lie as you can get, Daniel. It is a lie, an overt dishonesty. You report numbers that you know are false. That they're not even now. Consider if you were really in the business of wanting humanitarian aid there, and of course it's immoral to supply Gaza with humanitarian aid, as we've covered many, many times. It keeps the war going and it just prevents peace from happening. It prevents what needs to happen. In any case, why, if you were concerned about humanitarian aid, why would you exclude private donors anyway? You'd want to know the real humanitarian situation there. And then, of course, if they proceed to say government, they still don't have all the government aid because it's coming from Israel. But you ask why? Well, it's the same reason why they lie about the casualty numbers in Gaza. The very same reason. They hate Israel, they're anti-Israel, they're anti-Semitic. As a group, the United Nations is anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, irrationally pro-Islamist. That's what the same exact motive that has them accepting Hamas numbers. And we've covered the numbers on casualties for 16, 17 months now. Statistically impossible numbers, bizarre numbers, numbers pulled out of the sky, numbers that they even admit come from the bad guys who perpetrated October 7th, numbers that they admit don't distinguish between combatants and so-called civilians, as if there were much of a distinction there, I grant you. But the point is that they've lied. They've lied. Statisticians can prove that they've lied about the casualty numbers, and the same motive behind lying about the casualty numbers, lying about Israel bombing a hospital early on, for example, all the same reasons for those lies. Their hatred, their deeply ingrained hatred of Israel, and by implication, most of their members' hatred of civilization, is the same motive. Now, as we've said many times, the humanitarian aid should not be given by Israel. I mean, that's just utter perversity. That the people trying to defend themselves should be responsible for feeding the population of the enemy. Now, that's perverse in the extreme, but it's classic United Nations. The United Nations is coming up now to 8 decades of operation since World War II. Almost 80 years now we've had United Nations. And what the hell good have they ever done? They are an inherently morally corrupt organization. They did nothing to prevent the killing fields in Cambodia in the 1970s, for example. How many African countries have experienced atrocities? Rwanda, Sudan, where they have done in effect no good whatever. How about the Uyghurs now in China? Have they even one of their main points of the whole charter is to protect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of member states? Oh yeah, well Russia invades Ukraine, and what do? They can do nothing because Russia's on the Security Council. How have we betrayed Taiwan when in the early 1970s Taiwan was booted out and they were replaced by communist China? No, it gives aid and comfort to dictatorships. It helps dictatorships. It does nothing but hurt Western interests, the interests of civilization. It hasn't done a damn bit of good for anybody. You send in UN peacekeepers, and more often than not, they will rape and abuse the locals. They will steal money. But it goes far beyond corruption. It goes far beyond the edges of these things. It goes to the very core. The United Nations is an evil, truly evil organization, morally corrupt to its very essence. The very essence of the United Nations can only bring harm to civilization by morally sanctioning dictatorships, by protecting the territorial integrity of dictatorships, and look at the way they hate Israel. They'll change their definition of what a refugee is and have a special organization for Palestinian refugees. They'll change their definition of genocide just so they can go after Netanyahu. No, the UN hates Israel. They will lie about Israel. They routinely lie about Israel. It's come to the point now that if the United Nations says anything about Israel, you could just presume that it's a lie. But this is part and parcel of the UN in general. How many times have they revised their climate change models? They lie about climate change. They lie about Israel. They lie about casualties. They lie. They do nothing to prevent war. They only protect dictatorships. They are against the interests of the civilized world. They did nothing. I mean, you think, well, hey, didn't they prevent war between the Soviets and the United States? No, they had nothing to do with that. It was a nuclear standoff and a strong NATO alliance that prevented war in Europe until Russia invaded Ukraine, and now we've got a major war in Europe. They did nothing to prevent war in Europe. Nothing at all. It was only the moral strength of Britain and the United States standing up to the Soviets that fought back against them. My God, when the poor people of Hungary in the 1950s or Czechoslovakia, a combined nation which you were part of native, when they rose up against the Soviets, did the United Nations lift a finger to help these nations who were trying to get out from underneath the oppression of the Soviet Union? No, they have done nothing but evil. They are an inherently evil organization precisely because they have included the worst dictatorships in the world on the Security Council and just as members. And so, of course, they're lying about the humanitarian aid. There has never been a humanitarian. I mean, don't get me wrong. When there's bombs going off, there's going to be a crisis. There's going to be death. I'm sure there are thousands of Palestinians who've died. I'm sure that coordinating getting food and medical aid to them is difficult in these circumstances. But the humanitarian crisis they claim exists has never existed. There's no widespread starvation. There's not been any evidence of widespread starvation. But in order to create, I mean, and here we are, what, a year and a quarter or a third of a year plus now on waiting for this mass starvation that never happens? Well, it's because Israel has been feeding its enemy, and they ought not to. And they ought not to. It's only because of pressure from organizations like this that they do it at all, I suspect, or their own belief in the ridiculous morality of altruism, which says you have some kind of duty to feed the people who are pulling off October 7th against you, atrocities like that. No, they're an inherently dishonest organization. They're an inherently corrupt organization. I'd ask our trolls out there who always join us, can you name, and please do it in the form of a super chat, thanks. Can you tell me one goddamn thing the United Nations has done to help freedom and peace and human rights in this world? No, they have. Cuba and Iran have been on the Human Rights Committee. I mean, think of women disappearing in Iranian prisons because they protest the way women are treated there, or political prisoners rotting in Cuban jails. And Cuba and Iran, sure, put them on the Human Rights Council. No, it's an inherently evil, corrupt organization to its very core by its nature. In including evil nations like this, the enemies of Israel, for example, in it. And so it can do no good. Britain and the United States really ought to leave. I know it's not going to happen anytime soon, but there is no moral justification for a civilized nation, for a liberal democracy to be involved, a rights-respecting country, to be involved in the United Nations at all. They're evil, they're dishonest, they're liars, they hate Israel. They lie about everything connected to Israel. And of course, they're lying about the amount of humanitarian aid Israel sends in or allows to be sent in. Of course they do. Is that a surprise? These are the people who gave us UNRWA. The United Nations has been teaching evil jihadist ideology to Palestinian children for some time now, when the UNRWA operatives themselves aren't participating in October 7th or terrorist activities. No. They're an evil organization, and evil people lie. What can I say?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the numbers themselves, something that's interesting is, yeah, that basically they don't seem to acknowledge, many of the organizations don't seem to acknowledge many of the specifically even the private sector. And maybe you could make the case that if you are sort of trying to be this in a sense this international body and try to take in a sense collect your own data, you could make a case that, if you're not present at a specific crossing, that you might not be able to give you accurate data. Yet this again does seem, because and you don't want to take data from just in a sense one side, or specifically because the organization that is giving the data, the coordination of government activities in the territories, is under the Ministry of Defense of Israel.
Well, then they don't really care about humanitarian aid at all, do they? They're not in the business of actually counting if they cared about this humanitarian aid, which should not be going into Gaza. But if they really did care about the actual humanitarian situation, then by intention, they're cooking the numbers. They're lying about the numbers. Well, we won't count that. We're not going to be there since we can't verify that. No, you'd go out of your way to figure it out. You'd have people on the ground, you'd ask people, you'd get different estimates, you'd figure out what the most reasonable numbers are. No, all you're telling me is that they intentionally lie about how much humanitarian aid gets into Gaza. That's all you're saying. If they really cared about humanitarian aid, they'd be eager to count it all.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is that, you say, ah, well, I don't want to just take the Israeli numbers. I don't want to just give that one side. But then again, when it comes to, there are other reports, when it comes to the number of injuries, it's straight up simply
Gospel.
Gaza Health Ministry, which is under Hamas. It's simply doing their numbers again with oftentimes with no context of where these numbers are from. I think when it comes to sort of how they are confirming the numbers, oftentimes at least my understanding was that the UN tries to sort of call the hospitals, basically confirm those numbers. But we know hospitals are working under Hamas, hospitals are working with Hamas. It doesn't take much to basically, lie in whatever way you want to basically get those. And again, even when you're confirming the deaths, when you're confirming the numbers, you're just confirming that someone has died. You're not confirming if they were terrorists. You're not, and not to mention, I mean, there's so much not to mention that again, even when it comes to confirming the names, oftentimes they are reported as either children or as women, which again, I don't understand why women are sort of devoid of volition and cannot be part of like terrorist regime, but women and children are viewed as sort of like innocents and as sort of like a separate from a conflict. And oftentimes fighting age men are reported as women or as children. So again, I always say that when you're trying to be like a news site, when you're trying to be, and take something like BBC, when you're trying to be, I think the bar is much lower for international organizations. But when it comes to news site, that's why I really dislike when people say the news lie, because lying is something unique. Oftentimes it's nudging in a certain direction. Oftentimes it's more of a basically putting things in a certain context, or sort of reporting on things with very little context. As I say, when for example, just go back when BBC reported on the story of apparently that IDF dog has killed a boy, like a Palestinian, I think autistic a boy with Down syndrome, I think even. There was no real lie of it. It was just a report of one woman who said how it happened. Again, when it comes to this, it's
That's a
not a
lie. Those
lie.
are all lies. Those are lies, Daniel. If you are an international organization and you are giving numbers, and even if you say this comes from a Gaza Health Ministry, it doesn't. No, you're reporting numbers, and you have a moral responsibility if you're reporting the truth to give the truth and to give a better idea. When you scratch the surface on those casualty numbers, it turns out that more than half of the estimated children weren't killed at all, and that's just on the first scratch of that kind of BS data that they give us. No, if you're reporting on the humanitarian crisis, then what I want is all the data, or it's a lie. Because your data is designed to encourage countries to support the cause. No, if they're going to take it on themselves to report casualty numbers or humanitarian aid numbers, then they, as reporters, have a responsibility to figure it out. If someone tells you a story, you just don't believe someone and report that story. You verify it before you go forward. Sound journalism means you verify and corroborate the witness statements you get. Either there's film, there's footage, there's physical evidence, there's multiple witnesses, multiple sources, or you don't report it. That is dishonesty. It's dishonesty when reporters do it. It's dishonesty when the United Nations does it. It's an outright lie to give numbers that are misleading when you're you're trying to act like an official organization like the UN, or you're trying to say this is the truth, which at bare minimum, the BBC and the New York Times and the Guardian presumably are trying to give. What the hell business are they in with journalism giving us any data or facts if the data and facts they're giving us are utterly misleading and oftentimes outright lies? And it's their responsibility to do so. Or they're worse than journalists. They're liars. They're arms of propaganda. It's worse than non-objective. It's an outright lie. They know they are misleading. They know they are undercounting and overcounting. They know that. They have an axe to grind against Israel, and they're going to grind it with overt lies, even though they are publicly asserting as journalists or as an official organization where they have a moral responsibility to give the full context so that it isn't even implicitly misleading. But here they are explicitly misleading us. That's what I call lying.
Yeah, it's
Where I come
definitely
from, that's a lie, young man.
it's definitely dishonest, but I view I don't know, but like straight up, it's I think I view like lying as like you know, it's like a sort of like that's Rubicon, like it's a place of no return. It's really hard. Like you know,
No.
I would
When
think
you
of
go into
something.
an American court, the oath for the witness is, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yeah, but when you say Gaza Health Ministry reports this many people died in Gaza, it's not, you're not lying. There is not enough context to basically have a proper understanding.
If you don't put that in context, it is absolutely a lie. Especially if you repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, according to health, without any qualification. It's an outright lie. Now, these people, what you say in that context, if you want to avoid being a liar, you say these people have lied to us. Oh, and many statisticians have demonstrated that these are impossible numbers. Or you say we're not counting non-governmental aid, but we're also not counting what? Israeli aid, governmental aid. No, what you do is you give that context, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Simply saying Gaza Health Ministry, asterisk, well, that means Hamas, and repeating it every single time is a lie. Unless you say, we can't, of course, these are and you put it in big neon letters beforehand, of course, the very perpetrators of the atrocities of October 7th are the sole source for this number. Or unless you bring in the statisticians who say, no, the reported numbers are highly improbable and impossible in some cases. Or you bring in the actual numbers that you even know you're not counting properly of the aid going in. What is their goal? Is their goal really to tell us the truth about the humanitarian situation? Is their goal really to tell us the truth about the number of civilians? No. Their goal is obviously to mislead their readers or listeners. That's a lie. The UN is an inherently dishonest organization. They lie, as I say, about a great many things, and they've been doing so for decades. Officially, from climate change to Israel, they are inveterate liars because their whole organization is inherently corrupt. They carry water for dictators. They carry waters for the worst human rights abusers on the planet. Being an inherently corrupt organization, they spread lies. This is not surprising. Showing me that they lie about the aid going into Gaza is a boring yawn to me. It may be a shock to people out there listening to us, but there's nothing shocking about it. This is just another layer of lies from an inherently anti-Israel organization that is a truly evil organization. Now, Western media, they know better too. Absolutely. These media outlets, like the BBC or the Guardian, they know better. They absolutely know better. They were taught certain journalistic standards. Absolutely. And they've got their own political viewpoint that they're trying to shove down people's throats or get people to passively accept. Oh, well, that's the number. That's the number. You know, the Lancet number, for example, pulled out of the sky the number of casualties, pulled it out of the sky. Why don't we get real statistics on if there is a humanitarian crisis, that is to say, if aid isn't in there, if there's widespread starvation, then why don't we get evidence on that? Why is the evidence on well, this is how much aid came in and this is how much aid came in? No, how many children have starved? Tell me, literally, give me an estimate of how many children have starved in Gaza over the last 16 months, please.
Yeah, I
No.
mean,
See, and if you don't do that, then what you're doing is you're playing some kind of shell game. You know, on the streets of New York, you know, well, I lived in New York, there are these guys who set up their little tables. Where's the bean under, as they have the move around the three shells. Of course, it's a corrupt thing, and it's just a racket to get money out of you. That's what this is. It's a racket. It's a racket like a shell game, because they're not telling you the number of children actually hungry in Gaza. No, nor are they even giving you a remotely accurate number of the deaths in the war in Gaza. No, it's a lie. It's a shell game designed to pick the pockets, play on the sympathies of Western listeners and readers. That's all it is.
We have a super chat from Jonathan, thank you so much, and a super chat from Bonnie, thank you so much. And also Bonnie in the chat says, if in reality 1,000 trucks got in and the UN says 500 got in, that is a lie. Well, and this is, so yeah, that will be a lie. But this is sort of my problem, and I think why it's important to understand what exactly is happening here, to basically for yourself, so you have the proper understanding what's happening. Because it's not that 1,000 gets in, UN sees 1,000 gets in, and they only say 500. It's and I think understanding how they do it is also important to know how you defend yourself against it, and also for the neutral observers out here so they can check it for themselves. Basically, again, and now sort of summarizing because we have only a few minutes left. Basically, there is a number that basically Israel reports, which is about 5,000. Again, we are talking about in the month of December, and UN only reports 2,500. Now, what creates this disparity? What basically makes this difference? One part of it is, and how UN explains the difference is also what's important. Is basically what's happening. One part of it was that they basically when you check the UN numbers, and again everything's going to be in the description, they have like an asterisk. Oh, we cannot provide the numbers for the private, basically donations, private humanitarian aid, because we don't have anyone at Kerem Shalom crossing. Do I have the right name? Just so I don't. Kerem Shalom crossing. Since May 7th, we simply don't have anyone there. Now, again, what happened on May 7th? Hamas attacked Kerem Shalom crossing. So that's already like an interesting thing. So there's a disparity there. But when you check the Israeli numbers, again, the private donations are very little, maybe like 5%. Most of it is humanitarian aid organizations. And again, this is not Israel. This is like UAE. This is like FAO, which is another UN organization. So it's interesting they are not reporting on those. It's
Right.
Save the Children, Morocco, Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem. And basically what it looks like is that UN simply doesn't have this organization as part of organizations that are donating the aid. So again,
They say
it's not
that
like they
Congress,
see 5,000, they report 2,500. It's like they have the Israel number, but for some reason, part of those numbers they just ignore. They sort of, for some, and the most important part is with the private donations, they at least say like we cannot give private donations, we have no ability. So you could, in some ways, you could excuse that, but with the
wait. Why are they
organization.
reporting the numbers at all? Why are they reporting the numbers at all then? These numbers are so bad, what you'd say is this is all we know about. And obviously there could be half or more that we don't know about that we're not reporting. So what you say again with a big fat headline is do not rely upon our numbers. Our numbers should not motivate any action or stimulate any policy because our numbers could be 50% or more off. And so you say that you give the qualified truth about what you're reporting. Now, why would you be reporting that if it's such a qualified truth? No, they have a reason for reporting it, to create sympathy based on the misimpression that their numbers would give. That's a lie. I have to agree with Bonnie. But the point is, you wouldn't report the number at all unless you had some motive to stimulate more aid or cause some governments to do something, change their policy. No, you'd have to, if you were being honest, you'd have to say, well, don't rely on these numbers. These numbers could be 50% or more off. And so, but that's not what they do.
Yeah, again, just
That's
to
a
quickly,
lie.
because we are out of time, because I
Okay.
think there is a case for sort of like incomplete data if you know it's incomplete data, basically saying, hey, this is sort of what we have. If anybody wants to do anything with this, maybe for future research or sort of, how you collect data in this sort of situations, you can.
Okay.
But this is like a
If
thing.
they
But
framed it that way.
yeah,
If they framed it that way.
but people take the numbers at the face value, whatever is reported. And the UN, the OCHA, they have, I think they did like daily reports, basically, since October 7. I was pretty much checking it every day. And at some points they did it like every third day, and now it's different at different time periods. But people just look at that, see, oh, there's a new number, and just take it from there. And UN knows, even let's say UN somehow didn't know that people are, oh my God, people are taking these numbers and misreporting them. We don't want that. No, they, as you said, UN knows what's happening with those numbers, and they continue to report them in the same way. Again, if they're, I think, if you have pure intentions, that is, you could make a case for sort of incomplete numbers, sort of just saying, this is what we can get, and this is from other sides, but this is what we can 100% confirm. But again, people just take whatever UN says, and because it is mostly Hamas numbers, but Hamas is not at the head at the top of the page. It's UN, so it has more credibility, and people take it for what it is, despite the fact that many, well, I should say specifically with the amount of people that were killed, is purely Hamas numbers. James, any last thoughts?
No, I just wonder what, I just ask everyone within range of my hearing, what good has the United Nations ever done? I've seen them protect dictators. I've seen them fail to prevent wars. I've seen them do nothing when it comes to the worst human rights violations and slaughters in this world. And now I see them hostile to Israel itself, lying again, as they often lie, about Israel. So it is an inherently corrupt organization. Britain and the United States ought to have nothing to do with the United Nations. Um, that's my final thought. They are an evil organization, and good nations should leave them as of yesterday.
We have a super chat from Tora Worldwide saying, this is for James. I'm a Jew living in, what is Ayal? Is Israel? I guess it's Israel. I'll have to check out your book after, but I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the Jewish religion as far as in concern it's without holes? Oh, as far as I'm concerned, it's without holes.
Oh,
Just
I am not a fan of religion of any kind. I am an atheist. I believe that only reason can provide us knowledge. And so I am opposed to mysticism and supernaturalism as such. Now, if you ask me to compare religions, I would say probably the most secular religion in the world today is Reform Judaism. The Moses Mendelssohn, post Moses Mendelssohn type Reform Judaism is the most secular religion, but that's a comparative thing. I oppose all religion. My support for Israel is fierce, but it's not because of some, claim that the Jews were there for thousands of years. It's because Israel is the one rights respecting nation in the area. There's actually a nation that respects individual rights. And look at the wonderful things Israel has done there, especially in contrast to all of their neighboring states. I'm a fierce supporter of Israel, but it's not for religious reasons.
Thank you everybody for watching The Daily Objective. We'll be continuing on the reality show, where we'll be talking about the terrorist attack that happened earlier today in Israel. So make sure to check out that. Link is in the description. And as I said, all the resources for today are also going to be in the description, so you can check for yourself. Thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching, and bye-bye.
Be safe.